Morning, everyone. So I would like to welcome everyone this morning and thank you very much for joining us from this webinar about the Council's exciting new £8 million Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund, which is our new capital funding stream designed to enhance local areas. And we're really delighted that there has been such an interest in the fund so far and that so many of you have made time today in order to be able to join us. So I'm Sinead Grimes, I'm the Director of Physical Programmes within the Council, and I'm going to give you an overview of the fund and the application process. I'm also joined this morning by two of my colleagues, John Greer, our Director of Development, and Debbie Caldwell, our Climate Commissioner, who are going to give an overview of the three thematic areas that the fund will cover: neighbourhood tourism, environmental sustainability, and social economy. Then at the end, we'll cover a number of questions, and I would encourage you throughout the webinar to post any questions that you may have. And if we don't get through everything in terms of the question and answer session, then we'll be doing responses to all of the questions posed, which will be available on our website shortly after the webinar. So just a couple of house rules then for this morning. So please note that all cameras and microphones will be switched off for the webinar. If you would like to ask a question, please use the question and answer feature on your toolbar, and also just to please note that this session is being recorded. So I'm going to move in now in terms of giving you an overview then in terms of the actual application process and the fund itself. Just need to share my screen here. So hopefully everyone can see that now, okay? So as mentioned, this is our new £8 million fund designed to support capital projects in local neighbourhoods. So I just wanted to talk you through the fund in a bit more detail, what projects are eligible for funding, what we can and can't fund under neighbourhood regeneration, the three thematic areas that there are, the overall process that applications and projects will go through, and the outcome-based approach that we'll be taking for monitoring and evaluation of projects. So first is looking at what projects are eligible for funding, and there are a number of criteria that we have in place in respect of this. So firstly, there's a minimum threshold of 250,000 for any project. A project must also be for capital only, and I'll cover that in a bit more detail in a moment. It must be within the Belfast City Council boundary area, and it must align with one or more of the three themes. So that's social economy, environmental sustainability, or neighbourhood tourism. It must also be financially sustainable, and by that we mean that it must have no ongoing revenue implications for the council once the project is completed. It must not be an individual, a sole trader, or a profit-making organisation, the exception to this being unless you are registered as a cooperative or a social enterprise. And the project must not be on council land or in a council asset unless there's a long-term lease in place with the council. So we do recognise that this is actually quite a comprehensive list, and to make it easier for groups, we have an eligibility checklist on our website where you can do a very quick check on whether or not your project is eligible for funding before you go on to request an application pack or fill in an application. So I did mention that neighbourhood regeneration is designed to support capital projects only, and this list gives an idea of the types of things that can be funded under the Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund. But what I would stress at this stage is that this list is not exhaustive, and each project will be assessed on an individual basis. So the types of things that can be funded, as you can see, include building and engineering works, and that can cover anything from a complete new build to an extension, a modernisation, a conversion of an existing building. It can also cover any plant or equipment necessary for a project. NRF can also fund the purchase of the land or a building or equipment required for a project, and it can cover any professional fees associated with a capital project, for example, planning, project management, or legal fees. There is, as a capital fund, there is also though quite a number of things that the neighbourhood regeneration cannot be used to fund. So it can't be used to fund any administration, employee or office costs, any routine maintenance or repairs, any personal equipment, any personal maintenance or office equipment which are not essential to the project, any transport that is necessary for delivering the project. It can't fund the purchase of a leasehold that has less than 5 years to go. It can't cover any running costs post-completion, and it can't cover any loan repayments or funds to build up a reserve or surplus or any contributions to general appeals. Again, do recognise that this is quite a long list of what can be funded and what can't be funded, and it is a lot to take in. So this information is available in the guidance note on the fund, which is available on our website, and we'll put the link up for that information at the end of this. We're also very happy to take any queries on kind of what can and what can't be funded if groups wish to avail of this. So one other thing to highlight in terms of the neighbourhood regeneration is there's £8 million that's available overall under the funding stream. And as I mentioned, there's a minimum investment of 250,000, but there is no upper limit on what projects can apply for. The elected members have agreed a funding distribution across the city. So for North, it's £1,947,983. For South, £1,539,795. For East, £1,830,000 and £1. And for West, £2,682,221. And that includes £564,608 for the Shankill area. And one thing worth noting is that a project can be 100% funded under the Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund. So there is no requirement that's in place for match funding for any project. But if match funding has been secured, then that's great. But we do understand that all organisations and projects will be in different positions and that other funding isn't always readily available. So hopefully that has covered really, and everybody's clearer on how much is available, what can and can't be funded, and who is eligible to apply. So I just wanted to focus now in on the process that projects will go through under neighbourhood regeneration and to give you an overview of this. So essentially there is a 3-stage process in place for Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund, with stage 1 being the application process, which we call an emerging project. Stage 2, the development stage, which is essentially as an uncommitted project. And then stage 3, which is the delivery phase, whereby a project is then a committed project. So we're currently at stage 1, which is the open call application stage. Stage 1 requires the completion of an application form, which covers all the details on the project. And I'll go through the actual application form in a bit more detail in a moment. So groups themselves are actually responsible for completing the application form, but council officers will be available for a one-to-one appointment to discuss any queries that groups have on the application process or any queries that there are on the fund itself. So if groups do wish to avail of this opportunity, then please get in touch with us in order to book an appointment. After the closing date of the application stage, which is the 12th of May, projects will be scored by an assessment panel, which will be made up of council officers from across the council. Projects will be assessed against an assessment matrix, and a project will have to score over 55 in order to be able to move to the next stage. So the outcome from the assessment panel will be brought into our area working groups, which are groups made up of councillors from the north, south, east and west. And following this, they will then be brought into our Strategic Policy and Resources Committee, which is the Council's Investment Decision Making Committee. So once they are then agreed via council and via committee and ratified by a full council, successful projects will be notified and will then move forward to stage 2. Any projects which score under 55 in terms of stage 1 will be notified that they have been unsuccessful, but they will also get the opportunity to have feedback on their application and why they were unsuccessful. One thing I'd like to highlight at the moment is we are not sure just how much interest that there is going to be in this fund and how many applications we might receive during stage one. So we have reserved the right to increase that 55 mark threshold if there is a significant interest within the fund itself. We also do then anticipate that stage one will be completed by the autumn time. So in terms of stage two, if a project progresses to this stage, that's what we call the development stage. And at this point, every project will be allocated a project sponsor resource from the council, who will then work closely throughout that whole phase with the group. So during this phase, we will work with groups to develop a business case or an economic appraisal or detailed designs, all of which will be commensurate with the scale of the project. But we do understand that projects will be at different stages. So if, for example, there is already an economic appraisal or business case in place, we will then test this. We also understand that some projects may need some help within other areas, for example, capacity building. So again, that's something that we will look at as part of that. So we're not being prescriptive around this stage and exactly what will be required, because that will be based on the individual needs of each project. The development phase, however, is going to be time bound to 6 months. And at the end of this, the outcome will then again be reported back into our area working groups with recommendations on projects being brought forward to our Strategic Policy and Resources Committee. At this stage, those projects which receive committee approval will then move forward to the final stage of delivery. And at that point, groups will receive an in-principle commitment of funding, but a final investment decision will not be taken until a tender is actually returned, because only at that stage can we confirm that it's still within the affordability limits of the fund itself. So one other thing just to note in terms of delivery is that we're assuming that the council will manage and deliver all the projects, including all consultants and contractors. But if, however, groups wish to pursue a different delivery model, then this can be discussed with us during the application stage. So do understand at the minute that the focus is really going to be on the application stage. So if you've read the eligibility criteria and you have decided that your group and the project is eligible to apply, then please contact us at regenerationfund@belfastcity.gov.uk to request an application pack if you haven't already done this. So the pack contains a summary document about the fund, a copy of the application form, and guidance notes on how to complete the application. So if you decide to apply, then I would encourage you to read and familiarise yourself with both the application form and the guidance notes as much as possible before requesting an appointment with an officer, as this will just help to make the best use of time. And just really to emphasise again, the closing date for applications is the 12th of May. So I just wanted to touch upon the application form itself. There are 7 sections within the application, and we've set a word count for a number of the questions within those sections. I would stress that you don't have to reach the full word count, but please try to ensure that your responses are well structured and are clearly linked to the specific question. And you can use bullet points or however you wish to complete the questions themselves. So section 1 and 2 of the application form focus on the organisation and contact details, including financial and governance information. Section 3 relates to the project itself, the name of the project, a brief description, which we can then use to summarise the project, and also gives you the opportunity for a longer description about the project. Section 4 focuses in on the affordability and is about the cost for the project and how these have been arrived at. It also gives you the opportunity to highlight if there's any other external funding that has been secured or being sought towards the project. Section 5 is all about the feasibility of a project, including which thematic area your project aligns to out of social economy, environmental sustainability, or neighbourhood tourism. And in this section, we've also provided a list of outcomes, and I'll go into that in more detail in a moment as well. We don't expect projects to address all the outcomes, so please focus on those which are most relevant for your project. So this section also contains and seeks information on things like the project beneficiaries, etc. Section 6 focuses on deliverability of the project and is the opportunity to tell us about the proposed build, the site, where it is, ownership information, etc. And section 7 is about sustainability, the long-term usage of your project and how it will be managed. But we're also here asking about environmental impacts, how the project will complement other local initiatives, and how you will prevent any duplication or displacement from other projects. So just to be clear, in terms of the application form, there are a number of pieces of information that we need you to supply with your application. So that includes a constitution or the memorandum of understanding, financial information, including bank statements, and information on your board, including the list of board minutes, board members, and minutes from meetings. But there's also an opportunity to append other information that you feel relevant. So say, for example, a feasibility study or an economic appraisal, concept designs, funding offer letters or letters of support, project plan or a timeline, site photographs, or the environmental policy. So there's a checklist within the guidance note about what needs to be included. So again, please check that you have read that before submitting your project. We also do recognise that projects are all going to be at different stages and that not all projects will have this additional information. So all projects are going to be assessed on the information provided in the application form. So can you please ensure that you include all information relevant to your project, as we cannot assume anything at all about a project if the information has not been provided. So I've mentioned that there are 3 thematic areas under the Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund. These are closely aligned with our Belfast agenda, our city recovery strategy, and key corporate strategies. And John and Debbie will talk a bit more detail about these in a minute. But further information on all the strategies listed, so our inclusive growth strategy, our resilience strategy, and our draft 10-year tourism strategy, Make Yourself at Home, are available on our website, and there is also links to those strategies included within the guidance note, which goes alongside the application form. So when I was talking through the application, one of the areas that I mentioned in section 5 is that the application focuses on outcomes. So Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund is going to adopt an outcome-based accountability approach, an OBA approach to monitoring and evaluation. And I'm sure quite a few groups here today are very familiar with that process already. In the application, you will have to outline how your project meets some of the Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund outcomes. There are 2 mandatory outcomes, and you will need to tell us how your project will meet these. The 2 mandatory outcomes being the neighbourhood's physical environment is in better condition and that city services have been enhanced. You will also then have to tell us which of the thematic outcomes your project will address and how it will contribute to these. A project may address a number of different outcomes across the themes, but again, please only focus on the outcomes that are relevant to your project. So there are 4 outcomes under each of the thematic areas. So they're the ones for social economy. The city's social economy sector has grown and become more sustainable. Social economy contributes to an enhanced culture of entrepreneurship across the city. The sector has enhanced opportunities for individuals by supporting new skills development and employment opportunities. And the sector has delivered economic and social value across our neighbourhoods. Similar for environmental sustainability, the city and its residents are resilient to the impacts of climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions from housing, transport, industry, and consumption are reduced. The natural environment is enhanced to increase biodiversity and carbon sequestration. The city's economy is more circular, keeping resources in use for as long as possible through repair, reuse, and recycling to avoid waste. And in terms of neighbourhood tourism, tourism contributes to the sustainability of our neighbourhoods, contributes to an inclusive and diverse city. It contributes to the city development and connectivity, and it contributes to growing our economy. all of the outcomes can be discussed further in your one-to-one appointment during the application phase if you have any queries about these. So if there are any, please address these through that process at that stage. Finally, I just really wanted to give a quick overview of the assessment criteria that we will put applications through at stage 1. So projects will be assessed against 4 abilities: affordability, feasibility, deliverability, and sustainability. And you can see there a list of the things that we will assess under each of these. So those abilities are also aligned back to the application form. So again, it's just really stressing that you need to ensure that your application contains all relevant information that will allow us to properly assess the application against the assessment criteria. In terms of the assessment process, assessment of applications will only begin once the application stage closes on the 12th of May, and it will then follow the process that I outlined earlier. So I hope that that overview, and I know it's been quite a whirlwind, has answered many of the questions, but please keep submitting any questions that you have. And as mentioned at the start, we'll answer some of these at the end. That's also the contact details in terms of the fund. And that's where you would contact in order to be able to set up a one-to-one appointment and also to get the application pack. So Regeneration Fund at belfastcity.gov.uk. And then there's also further information on our website at www.belfastcity.gov.uk/regeneration fund. So next up, we're going to hear a little bit more about the thematic areas. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to John Greer, who's going to take us through the social economy and neighbourhood tourism thematic areas. And then we'll hear from Debbie Caldwell about the environmental sustainability theme.
Thanks, Sinead. So firstly, thanks to colleagues at Council for giving me this opportunity, and thanks to everybody on the webinar for the opportunity to tell people about our 2 strategies that relate to this fund. The first is Make Yourself at Home, our 10-year tourism strategy. Tourism in Belfast prior to the pandemic obviously was growing exponentially. Now the sector as a whole has suffered quite an impact as a result of the global pandemic, and this strategy is about helping us to reposition the sector to deal with the change in consumer habits as a result of the pandemic, and obviously then to further grow the sector in the city. The strategy at the minute, as Sinead mentioned, is available on our website and has been subject to a public consultation. It is due to go through our committee process this month, and we're hoping to have it ratified in early April. And for those of you that are fortunate enough not to understand council processes, that means that that's the point that will be officially a Belfast City Council strategy. But I would stress that the strategy itself has been subject to an extensive consultation before the formal public consultation with stakeholders and members of the public and sector groups, with a view to making it a really inclusive strategy. Our tourism strategy is largely based on our 10-year City Imagining cultural strategy. And the reason for that is we see that there has to be a really strong and authentic link between the place and the culture of Belfast and how we are articulating that to appeal to tourism and visitors. We feel that the successful articulation of local culture and values is critical to drive growth in tourism, particularly inclusive tourism, and to drive economic prosperity across the city and cultural vibrancy. But tourism contributes more than simply bed nights or pounds and pence in the till. And we're very keen to try to position Belfast so that it can avail of all of those benefits. As I said, Belfast has seen exponential growth of late, but we're still considerably behind other regions, as is expressed in the graph. In fact, when you compare us to the likes of Wales, now I know I'm biased, but I would like to think that we have a better product and story than Wales. Our tourism GVA take is less than half of that in Wales. So one of the key objectives of our tourism strategy, and of course Tourism Northern Ireland's strategy, is to double the value of tourism spend by 2030. Now, obviously that provides an opportunity to stimulate regional growth. It provides an opportunity to position Northern Ireland on an international stage and put ourselves and our brand in a more positive light. It has a huge opportunity to support inclusive economic growth. One of the great benefits in tourism is the growth in employment. In Belfast, jobs in tourism have risen by 19%. That's nearly double any other sector in the city. And considering the city has long-term challenges with regard to economic inactivity, long-term unemployment, chronic health conditions, and so on, we see tourism growth as providing a great opportunity for residents in the city. And of course, tourism and tourism infrastructure has a huge opportunity to regenerate cities, places, and communities. And that's why it's a core theme within this Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund. So the strategy itself is based on 4 areas of work. And as I said, the first area of work is probably the most critical, and that is to stabilise the sector following the impact of COVID-19, and then position it and invest in it so that it can generate further growth. And as I said, our ambition is to double the value of tourism to the Belfast economy by 2030, and do that in a way that is people-centred, responsible and inclusive. What we have found through our research and our work with Tourism Northern Ireland is that Belfast is doing relatively well in attracting tourists, but we're not doing relatively well in getting dwell time in tourists. So our focus on doubling the value of tourism is in 2 areas, is in securing more tourists to visit the city and ensuring that those tourists who visit the city have an opportunity and a desire to stay for longer. And that requires us to make a significant investment in a range of areas, not least in our messaging and positioning of the city. So the next area of work for us in the tourism strategy is Entitled Home, and it seeks to strengthen Belfast's positioning in domestic and international tourism markets, including business and leisure. Some of the research that we have reviewed as part of the strategy development has indicated something really interesting, that people are visiting Belfast and people are curious when they visit Belfast. And when they're asked, why in particular did you visit Belfast? They are, of course, talking about some key anchor products such as the Titanic and so on. But beyond that, it's their curiosity for this place that's driving their interest and ultimately their buying decision to come and visit Belfast. Now, that's a positive thing because it shows a really positive, emotion and curiosity towards the city. But we need to do better, and we need to do better in telling Belfast stories and telling really authentic stories to Belfast and connecting those stories into coherent visitor experiences, so that when people are at home, clicking on the internet, reviewing a brochure, or looking at a TV or a press ad or a radio ad or whatever it might be, or perhaps even just watching a programme that features Ireland or Northern Ireland, they understand the experiences and the thematic experiences and the products that we have here that they can come and visit. So essentially then they're building longer durations of dwell time when they come to the city. The next theme is experience, and this is based around Belfast telling its story and telling its story in a coherent, accessible and consistent manner. We have a lot of really fantastic tourism product already in this city, such as the Titanic, Ulster Museum, obviously the James Connolly Centre, other city assets. There's also council-owned assets that we have, City Cemetery, the zoo. But at the minute, they are not really well joined up. So we want to work with relevant tourism providers, organisations and products and experience in the city to create thematically driven, coherent experiences that join up a story for a visitor to the city. That provides an opportunity for us then to market those coherent experiences to potential visitors. It also affords us the opportunity to remove friction for the consumer. So for instance, if you want to visit the Titanic and you're interested in the maritime history in Belfast, then seamlessly you will be able to create an itinerary and a journey that speaks to that interest point for you. And obviously then the benefit for the city is that creates dwell time. But this is really about Belfast telling authentic stories of itself. When we did the consultation for the City Imagining Cultural Strategy, we consulted over 3,000 people through a range. And what we found was that the things that people were interested in the city, felt really strongly about in the city was a sense of place in the city, a sense of home, a sense of identity. So we have, if you see there on the right, if you like, a thematic framework that we're asking tourism product experiences to essentially build their product and experiences into. And of course, we want to invest in sustainable tourism experiences, and we want those tourism experiences to be community-based, to provide employment opportunities, but also if they're based in a community, by their very nature, they are authentic. And we want visitor servicing and product development to be intrinsic to this, and again, linked into communities. Sustainable tourism is a key focus of the strategy going forward. Many on the call will be aware that in some places where tourism has seen significant growth, tourism has seen by the residents as something that happens to them, not something that benefits them. That is something that we will not allow to happen in Belfast, and the strategy is built with sustainable tourism development at its heart. Now, sustainable tourism development encompasses some of what Debbie is going to talk about how we can build environmentally sustainable tourism, but also how we can build sustainable tourism where it is working hand in glove with the community, is not having a negative impact on communities, but as well, it is creating opportunities for community interaction, for visitors to work with communities and experiencing the tourism product that is there. In this theme, we will work with the Global Destination Sustainability Index. We will help products and experiences gain accreditation and help support them on the journey towards accreditation. And we will provide expertise around the development of sustainable tourism products. So specifically, in terms of our local tourism actions alongside Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund, we'll provide support for visitor servicing and information access points across the city. We'll provide assistance and funding for quality and innovative signage, interpretation and wayfinding assets, including new digital approaches. We will be developing our own council-owned visitor attractions, and that will be along the lines of a visitor experience plan, which will be embedded within the tourism strategy. We will provide support for tourism experts to enhance existing products or research and develop new sustainable products. And there'll be long-term capacity building for tourism providers in the city. And that'll be around that clustering effect of joining in with relevant and coherent experiences to form those journeys for consumers. So the next area I'm going to talk about is our work in social economy and cooperative. So for a long time, Belfast City Council has had a social enterprise and cooperative action plan, and that is in recognition of the fact that those sectors provide great opportunities for entrepreneurs and people to get into gainful employment that sometimes may not be able to access gainful employment within other sectors. And the social enterprise sector is extremely valuable to the local economy. It is worth 625 million, and it supports nearly 25,000 jobs and generates almost 581 million in wages. Co-ops generate over £1 billion in the Northern Ireland economy, and there are 257 in Northern Ireland with 779 members. The Belfast social economy sector has 1,200 registered organisations, which is very significant. Local communities are the single biggest beneficiary of social enterprise activity, with 53% of those surveyed employ half of their workforce from the immediate area. And that's a key reason why Belfast City Council want to invest in the sector, want to ensure that the sector grows, because it provides employment and opportunities for increased standards of living, economic prosperity, in our communities. Some of our communities, everyone will know, are among the most deprived in the country. We have long-standing challenges around economic inactivity. So we really see the support and growth of these sectors as vital to the economic vibrancy and overall standard of living in the city. We have a number of plans and policies which reflect this. The Belfast Agenda, which is our overarching community plan, our inclusive growth strategy, our social value procurement policy, which obviously directs, has Belfast City Council commissions goods and services that respondents must have a social value built into their response. And as I've already referenced, we have a social enterprise and cooperative action plan. So our objectives with that plan are to raise awareness of the social economy sector, to help increase levels of entrepreneurship within Belfast, and for our sector to be comparative with leading UK cities. We want to increase the number of social enterprise and co-ops in Belfast and sustainable social enterprise and co-ops in Belfast to create employment with the city and to develop the business skills and knowledge of the social economy sector and provide accessible support. And of course, we want to provide a platform collaboration and partnership working with the sector so that they can access these opportunities. We see this as being vital going forward. Some of the policies that I've touched on, such as our social value procurement policy, will provide significant opportunities to those businesses already in the social economy sector or entrepreneurs thinking about entering the social economy sector. So we want to provide capacity support to those people so they can access those opportunities. So what does our support currently look like? So we're here to help individuals and groups explore, refine, and start up a new social enterprise or cooperative organization. And that can be anything from initial mentoring, one-to-one support, business planning. We also will provide support to businesses to get set up and running. We will also help them scale their businesses. We will also help them generate and think about income generation and how then that income generation can be reinvested in their local communities. And to do this, our Social Economy Incentive Fund provides financial assistance of up to $10,000 for either existing businesses or new social enterprises and cooperatives to develop and scale business ideas, sustainable business ideas that will generate benefits for their community. So now I'm going to pass over to Debbie Caldwell, who's going to provide you with some information with regard to the environmental and sustainability theme within the Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks again to everyone for joining the session today. So, okay, I'm going to take you through the environmental sustainability theme here. So, as a city, we rely really heavily on natural resources to make our products and our services. We produce waste, including greenhouse gas emissions, and we're increasingly experienced in climate change. And we know that if we cause too much damage to the environment, we could reach a point of no return. So that's why we've made environmental sustainability one of the key themes for this fund. So the resilience strategy was developed in 2020, and it has this overarching goal of reaching or transitioning to an inclusive net zero resilient economy in a generation. And next slide, please. So there are 4 theme outcomes which are intended to help us deliver this strategy on the ground. So the first one relates to getting the cities and the residents resilient to the impacts of climate change, and that really links to flooding and heat stress. The second one is looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from housing, transport, industry, and consumption. And the third one relates to enhancing the natural environment to increase biodiversity and carbon sequestration. And the fourth one is making the city's economy more circular. And that means keeping resources in use for as long as possible through repair, reuse, and recycling to avoid waste. So I'll go through each of these now. If we go to the next slide, please. So the first outcome relates to building resilience to climate change. So as a coastal city, Belfast is really vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. and with sea level rise and flooding and extreme heat as the biggest impacts in Belfast. And this means that in future, there's an increased likelihood of hotter days, which is going to impact on the most vulnerable households, and flooding. And by that, I mean surface water, river flooding and sea level rise, which may impact on local communities. So what does building resilience to climate impact involve? Well, it's really about investments in green infrastructure, and building resilience through rain gardens, swales, which you can see there on the diagram, urban tree cover. It's about making the surface more porous through sustainable urban drainage and looking at our soils. And there are lots of benefits around that in terms of increasing property values, creating better air quality, improving amenity and recreation, community aesthetics, and then using trees and so on to kind of cool the area and buildings around and improving water quality. So if for more information, you can go to the resilience assessment and the Belfast climate risk assessment for infrastructure assets, which are kind of studies that underpin our resilience strategy, which is on our website. If we can just go to the next slide, please. So the second outcome relates to kind of bringing down emissions of greenhouse gases from the city. So as a city, we are a net importer of energy, and we rely really heavily on fossil fuels in terms of coal, gas and oil to heat the buildings, and on petrol and diesel for virtually all of our transport needs. We as a city spend around £300 million every year on energy, and that is forecast to grow to around £500 million by 2050. Most of the emissions in the city are coming from our buildings, and nearly half from our city's sort of aging housing stock, another 20% from our commercial buildings. We have around 21% of our emissions coming from transport and 15% from industry. Our inefficient buildings really are compounding the problem of fuel poverty in the city, which even before the energy crisis was quite high compared to other cities. So we have last year developed a carbon roadmap for the city, and that has shown us a pathway to reach net zero by 2050. And if we're to do that, we need our emissions in the city to drop by 80% by 2030. So we've got to do a lot of the heavy lifting in the next decade. So we want to make it easier for people to live a carbon neutral life in the city. And this means things like reducing car dependency through sustainable modes of transport, walking, cycling, public transport, etc., and making the place, the city centre, a better place to live. It means switching to electric vehicles. It means looking at our buildings, retrofitting, insulating and draft proofing properties across the city, as well as decarbonising the heat supply to our buildings by installing renewable energy sources and through community energy schemes. And if you need more information on this, take a look at the Belfast Carbon Roadmap, which charts that path and gives you an idea of where all the emissions in our city are coming from. If we can go on to the next slide, this is the third outcome relates to protecting and supporting our natural environment. It's now really widely accepted and recognised that climate change and biodiversity are interconnected. We know the environment brings many benefits, including biodiversity, fixing carbon dioxide from the air, and it supports, the physical and mental health well-being, and reduces the impact of flooding. We also know biodiversity is really affected by climate change, and that has negative consequences for the well-being of communities as well. So investments that protect and restore degraded habitats, things like planting wildflower meadows, trees and hedges that can support wildlife and nature, improve the connection between nature and human beings is what this theme is all about. I'm just going to move now to the next theme. Next slide, please, which is all about the circular economy. And this is all about reducing the inputs of raw materials to the city's economy and reducing outputs of waste materials. And what that means is that we're trying to shift away from this traditional linear economy, which takes raw materials from the environment and turns them into new products, which are consumed and then disposed of as waste back into the environment. Because that approach just relies on an endless supply of raw materials and energy and creates high emissions. So what we want to do is we want to kind of encourage a move to a circular economy where we can create more growth, more jobs by keeping more products and materials in use and minimizing that residual waste. So under this outcome, we envisage projects that promote the 3R principle: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And this is where things are reused, remanufactured, and then recycled back into raw materials, which are then used as a source of energy. And we're only disposing of things as a last resort. So that means we need to design out waste and pollution, and then keep all the products and components and materials in use at their highest value. We had a visit from the mayor of Lahti during COP26. Lahti is in Finland. It's a European green capital, and it's aiming to become a zero waste circular economy by 2050. They actually don't have a landfill in Lahti anymore because they recycle more than 99% of their household waste. So a third of it goes into recycling, and the other 2/3 is used to produce energy. So this has been done in other cities, and this is the direction that we'd really like to go in. So in terms of like the local economy, that means supporting local repair shops, urban agriculture, those types of things. In the construction sector, for example, this means avoiding or minimizing the use of virgin materials, looking at how we can refurbish our buildings rather than knocking them down and rebuilding. And then where we are building new buildings, we're going for a net zero or positive approach. So I hope that gives you a bit of an overview of the 4 themes. As Sinead said, we have the resilience strategy posted on the website, and we're also available if anyone has any queries. Don't hesitate to come back to us. So thanks very much for your time, and I will hand back now to Sinead.
Great, so many thanks to Debbie and John. I think that's really given some food for thought in terms of the work that's ongoing and the breadth and scale of the work that's ongoing, and to look at how projects then can align in with those. And as we mentioned, all of those documents are available on our website, so that you can look through them in more detail. So we have been encouraging you to ask questions, to submit this throughout the webinar, and I'm delighted to say actually that there have been so many questions. Appreciate that we only have a very limited amount of time left today, and we won't be able to go through every question that's been posed, but we will follow up on everything that has been asked, and we will post the responses on our website so that people can see those. But there is a couple of queries, similar type queries, that have come up a couple of times. So I'm just going to pick up on those. So one of the first ones is about the overall spend and delivery for projects. So if successful, when do funds need to be spent by? We are really anticipating that the delivery of projects will commence in 2023. So, but we do understand that all projects are individual. So the timelines for each project are going to be dependent on the individual circumstances. We will do a funding project agreement for any project which comes forward, and there will be timescales that will be contained within those funding agreements. So another one that's come up is just again around the timeline for decisions. So just really emphasising, at the minute, we are anticipating that decisions on stage 1 applications will be no later than the autumn. So stage 1 will close on the 12th of May, and then following that, they'll be evaluated by the assessment panel, and then we'll go into the area working groups, and our SP&R committee is highlighted. And if we can bring the timetable forward in any way, then we will look at this. But at the minute, we are still anticipating a very high level of interest in the fund. A similar one that's come up a couple of times is there any upper limit on the funding that's available? There isn't any upper limit on how much can be applied for under neighbourhood regeneration, but as highlighted, there is an allocated budget for each area within the city. And just to stress again, the minimum amount that can be applied for is 250,000. A couple of people have asked, can more than one thematic area be picked? And the answer to that is yes, of course. We do recognise they have to align to at least one of the thematic areas, but we do recognise that some projects may be able to align to 1, 2, or 3 of the thematic areas. But to be eligible, a project only needs to be able to show alignment with one of the thematic areas. We have had a couple of queries about whether or not the fund will support restoration type work to buildings and repair work. So if the restoration or the repair work helps to improve the building for community use, then yes, this can be considered. So all projects that we look at will be subject to a due diligence process. But as highlighted earlier, we cannot support routine maintenance or repairs to a building. If an organisation has previously received funding from the council for a capital project, then are they still able to apply? Yes, there is no difficulty around that. If you've received funding in the past from another different capital funding stream from the council, that doesn't prevent you from submitting an application under Neighbourhood Regeneration Fund. And can an application be made for the fund alongside other funding? And again, the answer to that is yes. So there is a section in the application form which highlights whether or not you have applied for other funding or whether funding is being sought or has been secured. But as I stressed earlier, a project does not require match funding. And the most common question really was, will a copy of the presentation be available? And yes, we will get a copy of the presentation and John and Debbie's available on the website following this. So, I mean, I would just really like to say thank you again for everyone for taking the time to join today. As mentioned, you can request an application pack on our website via Regeneration Fund at belfastcity.gov.uk. And don't forget that if you wish to avail of a one-to-one appointment with an officer, to then also request that as well too. So we are really excited to see what projects are going to come forward and the longer term positive impacts that they're going to have on the city. So thank you again to everyone, to Debbie and John and everyone who joined in the seminar. And I'd really like to say also good luck with all the applications.